So for the 28th lesson of class, we are going to revisit your government class and look at the philosophies of John Locke and Thomas Hobbes, and then the two concepts of negative liberty and positive liberty, which brings me to the fundamental question: what is ethical in regards to governing other people? And it really doesn't matter at what scale of governance we're talking about. And you already know there are various governmental systems in place. Which one is the most ethical and why? Which one is the least ethical and why? And I think we can look at two men as kind of the bookends, the philosophical bookends. And I'm not trying to dismiss Plato's Republic and Machiavelli's The Prince, but these two men, you can really look at their philosophies and it encompasses a lot of these governmental systems. And to the left we have John Locke, and to the right we have Thomas Hobbes. Now, in addition to these two men during this class, hopefully you got across the concept of negative liberty and positive liberty. Now, negative liberty is freedom from interference by other people. Negative liberty is primarily concerned with freedom from external restraint, whereas positive liberty is the possession of the capacity to act upon one's free will. I don't want to muddle things up too much, but I do feel the philosophies of Locke and Hobbes and these two ideas, which are more modern, really do blend together into this fundamental philosophical debate that we've had in class and we have in the world every day. And again, the concepts of negative liberty and positive liberty, much more recent than Locke and Hobbes. This comes from Isaiah Berlin in his 1958 essay. And this essay contributed to a revival of interest in political theory in the English-speaking world and remains one of the most influential and widely discussed texts in that field. It explores the philosophical nature of freedom and its distinction between negative liberty, and on the simplest of levels, negative liberty is freedom from, whereas positive liberty is the capacity to. All right, so let's go back to Locke and Hobbes. Now, the way they saw human nature. Now, Locke felt that man by nature is a social animal. Hobbes said man is not by nature a social animal. Society could not exist except for the power of the state. So one takes a much more sunny view of humankind than the other. And I think depending on the day, you might have more of Locke's view and more of Hobbes' view on other days. Now, the way they saw the state of nature. Locke said, in the state of nature, men mostly kept their promises and honored their obligations. And though insecure, it was mostly peaceful, good, and pleasant. Whereas Hobbes said, no society, and which is worst of all, continual fear and danger of violent death, and that the life of man is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. So here's the hypothetical. If you were left in my classroom without any authority figure, and you just existed there, would it be a good time, a positive time? Would people be good to each other, or would it disintegrate into chaos? And we did a little demonstration earlier in class to see what happened, and I found it very interesting, and I found your thoughts very interesting. Now, the way they saw the knowledge of natural law, Locke said that humans know what is right and wrong and are capable of knowing what is lawful and unlawful well enough to resolve conflicts, that we as human beings innately understand right and wrong. Whereas Hobbes said our knowledge of objective true answers on such questions is so feeble, so slight and imperfect as to be mostly worthless in resolving practical disputes. In a state of nature, people cannot know what is theirs and what is someone else's. Property exists solely by the will of the state. Thus, in a state of nature, men are condemned to endless, violent conflict. And for those of you who are dogging out Hobbes, saying, geez, Hobbes, ease up. Well, look at the 20th century. Look at the calamity of the 20th century. Maybe Hobbes is onto something. And a lot of you spoke of, well, it's a little bit different if everybody has their needs met versus people don't have their needs met. But then again, human nature, will we always want more? Will we be greedy or will we be content? A fundamental question of philosophy and not an easy answer for sure. Now, in terms of conflict, Locke said that peace is the norm and should be the norm. We can and should live together in peace by refraining from molesting each other's property and persons. And for the most part, we do. Whereas Hobbes said, man cannot know good and evil, and in consequence can only live in peace together by subjection to the absolute power of a common master. And therefore, there can be no peace between kings. Peace between states is merely war by other means. Which brings us to our ramifications. So why are we learning about these two people? Well, the ramifications exist on a couple different levels. The social contract, the relationship between authority and subject, between the citizen and the state. How you see their philosophies affects that social contract. What should be done when the social contract is violated? What constitutes a civil society? What are the rights of man? What is the role of state? And when is governmental force or intrusion justified? And I don't want to give my 2 cents too much here. I want you to think about this, and you did in class, and I loved hearing your discussions on these matters. But again, how you view these items, these ramifications can be directly tied to the philosophies of Hobbes and Locke. And it's a bit of a back and forth. You know, I don't think anybody has been, and this is a gross simplification, 100% Lockean or 100% Hobbesian. A lot of people say, hey, there's a time and a place for it. You have to look at circumstances. You have to look at the context of the time. And I think that thinking is more enlightened thinking. Okay, so associated with these philosophies are the ideas of negative versus positive liberty. So negative liberty on the simplest of levels is freedom from. So individual freedom from governmental authority or regulations or from a church or based upon a class status. You have freedom from, whereas positive liberty is freedom to. Individual freedom seen in terms of the capabilities. Freedom to compete successfully in the job market through education and whatnot. Freedom to live in a healthy life without poverty or lack of medical care. So again, similar to what I asked you with Locke and Hobbes, what are the ramifications of this? Now, I normally end with the journal entry, but I'm going to actually give you the journal entry first because a lot of people are going to miss the boat because this is some tough stuff. And if you're struggling with this, it's okay. It's how we build up our brains. So here's the journal entry I'm going to have you write, probably a little longer than normal. What are the differences between the philosophies of Locke and Hobbes? Also, what are the differences between positive and negative liberty? Now, here's the challenging part. Provide tangible, real-world applications of today's teachings. Okay, so what you learned today, what are some practical nuts and bolts applications of this? So here's some help. Now, I want you to think about how classrooms are run. Let's keep it on the simplest, smallest scale here. At what point do your teachers engage in Locke-oriented practices and how sometimes they engage in kind of Hobbesian practices? What is the correct way to do it? Now, let's scale it to something bigger. Governmental systems. How do their philosophies apply to the various governmental systems? Now, you look at historical documents for those who are good history students. The Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, Roosevelt's 4 Freedoms. Are these based from negative liberty or positive liberty? Is it based on Locke's philosophy, Hobbes' philosophy? And I'll share with you a little bit. Thomas Jefferson was greatly influenced by John Locke, and I think you can see that, even his language that he uses when he writes the Declaration of Independence. Religious freedoms. So, for example, homeschooling. My religion says I don't want my children to go to public school. I want to teach them just how I want to teach them, even if it's not an adequate education deemed by the state. Is that okay? The refusal of baking a cake for a gay couple to say, hey, my religious belief says I can't bake that cake. A Jehovah's Witness is in the hospital and needs blood, but they refuse blood. Now, how do you apply these standards to those scenarios? And then your political beliefs and your party affiliation. You know, how you see the world politically, I'm going to make an argument, stem from how you view Locke and Hobbes and positive liberty and negative liberty. And a little more specific is libertarianism. Is it a viable political philosophy? Why or why not? So, tough day, but we got through it, and I loved hearing your discussions. And bear in mind, these philosophies do apply to the real world, and you will see this time and time again in these issues time and time again. So, thank you for watching.